what's scary about this for dealers is they're like, we don't have time to figure out plan Bs for all these processes. But what if they just took one a week in their weekly meeting and said, today we're going to figure out our process for if our CRM goes down. Today we're going to figure out our process if our service scheduler goes down. What do we need to have in place to help ensure business continues to run? And when we're talking about like the financial impact, and yes, that was massive, but let's also not forget about the trust from our customers.
Imagine waking up to find your entire digital infrastructure has been compromised. Today on Fact Stop Feelings, we're unpacking the CDK cyber attack that shook the automotive industry to its core. I'm Brooke Furniss, and joining us is the one and only Laurie Halter, founder of Charisma, who will help us navigate the aftermath of this landmark security breach and its far-reaching implications. Stay tuned as we explore what this means for your data security and how it's reshaping industry practices. My dear friend, Laurie, welcome into the show, friend. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm great. I can imagine all your listeners right now are like, why is Laurie Halter talking about the cyber attack?
We like to mix it up and throw some curveballs to see if you guys are paying attention, what's going on in the industry. So yeah, that's what we're doing right now.
Exactly. Like, get back to PR and women's rights. Get up, Bill Laurie.
Seriously, what are you doing right now? I'm not sure about this. Who is this person? No one been dealing with her.
Exactly.
Well, we were talking before we jump in here that you've done like a whole research on, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And like, so you came with the topic. I was like, CDK cyber attack. All right, let's roll.
So I have to tell you, we did just recently launch a research arm, and we thought, what was the biggest challenge this year for automotive? And by far, right, it was this breach. I mean, that was the most overreaching thing of 2024 by far. So I'm excited to talk about it today.
Yes. And then as it turns out, as we'll get into this, like that, I had just went off air for like the first time since I started my show, which was like 4 years ago. And I go, of course, the moment I go, it was within like, 30 days of going off air that this whole thing happened. I was like, I'm not going back on air. Like, I need a break. So
it was insane. But Brooke is the reason this happened. Brooke getting off here is the reason.
Not even a question. I remember, like, not that it's something tragic in regard to like a world tragedy, but I was like, I remember exactly where I was when it happened. I was like, oh, and I'm not doing a show.
I have to tell you, same. And the reason is I was in San Diego on a girls trip, and my phone starts getting blown up, and I'm like, poolside, and I'm like, oh, now I have to go deal with this, So like, I purely remember where I was for that.
Oh yeah, I was in a client, so thankfully I had rentals, so it wasn't such a big deal. But yes, same thing. All right, so let's get this thing rocking and rolling here. And I want to start from like the very beginning with all this chaos that happened. Can you give us an overview of what happened with the CDK cyber attack? Maybe there's someone living under a rock, maybe just got into the industry, you're unaware, but just give us an overarching overview of what happened.
Yeah, so for sure. So in early summer, June of this last year, CDK experienced a very significant cyber attack. They call it a breach. We're calling it a cyber attack because what happened is bad folks got in through a point of entry and were able to lock down the entire CDK data system, which, as everyone knows, handles the DMS, which is literally every department contact, everything within dealerships across the United States. So for a 2-week period, you had the entire automotive industry paralyzed, and they ended up paying $25 million after 2 weeks in order to get it back up and running. But it really showed our industry in a big way the vulnerabilities, first of all, that there are out there, and secondly, that this one event, one or two data providers can really take down an entire industry. So I think everyone was shocked by the extent of it. I think everyone was shocked by how much damage it created and quite frankly, the amount of downtime that it created. And so I would say it was our single biggest impact of 2024.
And of course, as soon as I go off air, of course. So yes.
Brooke was the main culprit of this.
I was 100% the problem there. I am the problem. I am the drama. Yes.
Exactly.
But it is, to your point, like I was really shocked. I won't say, maybe I'll say shocked, but like just how much damage incurred. whether that's time, money, financial, mental, just mental energy that went into it. I mean, every day when I was working out in the gym, on TV was about CDK every single day. I was like, man, this is. I mean, you think it's just auto, but like, oh, this is affecting everybody.
Oh my gosh. And I meant to tell, and so here's a good example of that. This is something I didn't even think about. If you can't get loans through, that affects the credit unions. If you can't get insurance through, that affects the insurance providers. So really, to your point, it truly rippled throughout not just our industry, but a lot of other companies that are ancillary companies that, parts. I mean, there was just so many areas that were affected by this outage.
So that just brings us in the nice little next question. Perfect segue here. There were so many vulnerabilities that were exposed. So what can other industry players learn from this incident? Because it wasn't just us. Like, I remember having a conversation with someone. I'm like, here's the ripple effect of how far this goes. Pretty much, if you purchased a car in the last 10 years, you were affected. Like it's
100%. Right. And so, I mean, I think the biggest vulnerability is automotive has actually been seen as one of the weakest industries, unfortunately. This is what we're finding. So, guys, now what that means is bad guys are like, oh, wow, we can cripple an entire industry. And here's why. Usually these guys get in through one single point of contact, right? And because of the way the data was set up in the DMS, that affected thousands of dealerships throughout the United States. So what you've got is one employee at a dealership who may have clicked on one wrong link, and that opened up a pinpoint to take down, in a way, a domino system of thousands of dealerships. So first things first, I think the biggest thing is we need to find a way to silo this data and spread it across multiple silos, because the main problem here is we had one centralized system of data for, again, tens of thousands of companies. And that was the biggest factor here, is just the sheer amount of places it could go. And then I think the other thing this really opens up, and this has been an ongoing argument, is who owns the data, and do we give the data rights to 1 to 3 companies within the industry? And there's a lot of arguments about like who should own it. Our independent researchers truly feel like the consumers are the ones who should own the data. But, I have vendors who think differently on that. But I think it really exposed just the dangers of having data housed within 1 or 2 main providers in the industry.
And we might get into this. If not, I'm going to go there right now. That was multiple conversations with higher ups of saying, hey, how's the OEM going to play in this? Are they going to say moving forward, like you cannot house all your data in one spot. It needs to be here and here on the chance that something happens. But yeah. And I even saw like from a stance of, hey, we'll call it CDK product, Insera product, Synchro, whatever name I want to say, ADP, Cobalt, whatever you want to call it. But hey, we have Roadster. Well, Roadster wasn't necessarily affected, but it was like, no, we don't want anything to do with that anymore. Oh, this one wasn't really affected, but we don't know if we can trust anymore. Yeah. I'm like, on the flip side, understand that one thing for me, that this is going off scripture for a hot second, but that's how we roll here, is that I was also shocked how many people were so quick to throw stones. And I go, you do understand, if it can happen to CDK, you're next. Like, you are next. Like,
100%.
Take that aside.
Right. I mean, and so when I was speaking with the researchers, Chris, who was our main researcher of the report, was saying, like, I love this line. He said, the best time to figure out your vulnerabilities is right after it happens, because we are very aware at this point, dealerships, vendors, manufacturer, every single player involved now knows the vulnerabilities. They know the processes that were taken down. They know the departments that were affected. And so one of the best things we can do right now is look at the vulnerabilities in your own business and then come up with plan B and, support systems and processes to ensure that if this happens again, and maybe not with the DMS, maybe with the CRM, maybe with your parts department, your parts inventory, you need to have some kind of plan in place. And I think the truth is, and I've heard this for years, our industry specifically is very profit driven. So the idea was like, we'll handle that at some point. We'll get to that at some point. Well, this is brought to the center that, this needs to be happening now. This needs to now take priority, whether it brings in profits or not.
Amen. So I know there's a lot of lessons to learn here. We've talked a little about how dealerships and industry vendors should adjust just their cybersecurity a little bit more. But what do you see as some of the big things that they're going to need to adjust for those cybersecurity strategies?
Yeah. So I think, best case scenario is they bring in a third-party cybersecurity provider who really specializes in this stuff. We were on a briefing call the other day with one of those, and he said, let me just show you in real time a dealership who we're working with right now. And they were able to pinpoint in this kind of web the different danger areas. Brooke, I have to tell you, it lit up like fireworks. I mean, there were these little red dots and they took over the entire screen. And so, I mean, definitely look into cybersecurity. Now, I know some of the smaller dealerships and some of the independent guys were like, we can't afford an outside cybersecurity firm. So I think the key there is when your contracts are coming up, not just with your DMS providers, but with any provider, it's fair at this point to ask, what security measures do you have in place for the customer data or any data for that matter? And to really grill them on, do you have plans for if this happens? How would you help us? What is the support and plan Bs that you have in place? Really take it to these providers who are in charge of the data and say, and the best place to do that, right, is when you're re-upping for the year during your annual subscription, because it's a fair question and it's been shown now in the industry that it can and will happen.
And it is, and you talk about smaller dealerships. I understand that everyone's going to have a budget to have this $1 million policy, a multi-million-dollar policy. I understand as well. I saw a meme this morning. Actually, just funny enough, it was like, "Hey, my company sent out a $20 gift card, and I clicked on it, and I'm now stuck in training for cybersecurity." So, even like, and it's funny, like even we go back to GLBA for a hot minute here, and I had multiple groups after like 6 months. They're like, so we got everything set up so we can just cancel all this, right? I go, you can do whatever you want. I would not suggest that because GLB, all these FTC compliance, and whether it's cybersecurity or anything like that, I go, this is an ongoing thing that you have to continually work at, to have the training, to have everything in place. It's not just, I'm going to stroke a check and we're done with it. It doesn't work that way. I wish it did, but it doesn't.
No, you're absolutely right. And we even spoke with one dealer who said, look, if we got rid of, at this point, CDK and just said, like, because of this breach, we're moving on, she said, we would literally have people quit because they know this system. So it's so entrenched within their dealership that they don't want to learn a new process. And I understand it affects every single department. So I think to your point, we can't just go, oh, well, let's just cancel it and move on. That's not an option. So really, one of the things we're telling smaller dealerships right now is, okay, if you can't afford a cybersecurity firm to come in, a lot of people had to go back to like paperwork processes. They went back to writing repair orders by hand. I heard a lot of people who were doing like on paper credit applications and then working with the banks. So at the very least, look through the processes that you had to put in place while you were down and start putting together some game plans for that should it occur again.
Yes. And even with that, like, I did find it, I'm not going to say funny because it was not a funny thing. Right. It was interesting to say people that have been in the industry for a long enough time that before the internet, before really, well, I won't say before computers, but we'll say before that. Because all of a sudden you're like, well, this is how we used to do it back in blah, 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 blah. And now it's like, whoa. It's like when you don't have your phone for 2 seconds, you feel naked. You're like, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. And in fact, I'm like, well, actually, there are other ways to do things. And so do you have that in place to know that, hey, if all systems go down, what's going to happen? Like, do we have a process in place for this?
Right. And it doesn't have to be like a 2-day. I think what's scary about this for dealers is they're like, we don't have time to figure out plan Bs for all these processes. But what if they just took one a week in their weekly meeting and said, today we're going to figure out our process for if our CRM goes down. Today we're going to figure out our process if our service scheduler goes down. What do we need to have in place to help ensure business continues to run? And when we're talking about like the financial impact, and yes, that was massive, but let's also not forget about the trust from our customers. That was a massive piece that no one's really focusing on. We lost a lot of trust with car buyers and service department, folks coming in for service. And so that's going to take a long time to rebuild. One of the ways you can do that is say, we're putting processes in place. So should this happen again, we have a way to continue business.
Oh yeah, it is nuts how, I'm going to say how far reaching. I know we said it multiple times, but I go back before I got into auto. My background is the medical field, and we would I was an athletic trainer. So for those that are unaware, the person you see run onto the field when something happens, an injury happens, that was me. And we would practice all type of emergency situations. Like it didn't matter if you never used them, but like you practiced. I mean, it was so ingrained to you that XYZ happens. This protocol and this protocol and this protocol are going to happen. And God forbid it does happen. When it does happen, you're automatically already in that mindset, like, hey, I'm good to go. We've all seen, whether it's Damar Hamlin, we've seen some really crazy stuff in professional sports where that's actually happened. It's like, as long as you have that best practice in mind and know the protocol, you're good to go. Now, did we all learn it in one day? No. Right. It constantly evolved. Like, oh, we're at a new stadium, we're at a new arena. So what's it now? So you would do all this prep beforehand. And are we doing that internally with our dealerships?
Yeah, absolutely. And that doesn't require a new cybersecurity firm coming in. That can be as simple as, okay, every weekly meeting, we're going to take one aspect of our dealership that needs a contingency plan, and let's put together that contingency plan today.
Amen. So we're gonna get a little left turn in Albuquerque here for a hot second. So you recently launched this research arm at Charisma. Yes. Which I was like, this is freaking awesome. Probably said other words, let's be honest, because that's me and you. So guarantee I did. There were another F word involved there. But how does this new venture relationship especially influence your approach to public relationships, especially when the crisis situations like this?
Yeah. So I love that question, because one thing that we're trying to make sure we get out is, even though we're a PR firm, this is an independently held research arm. So our researchers have nothing to do with our clients on this site. So that I say that first, because when you hear a PR firm, it's like, oh, great, all of their clients are going to be in the reports. That's not the case. This is very, very separate from PR. But what we found is there's really not a lot of people, maybe Automotive News, maybe Cherokee Publishing, are kind of putting out these broad reports on trends, but there's really not a lot of folks that are looking at the massive impact of some of these major trends. So we said, okay, if we don't have anyone doing that, we're going to do it. And so that was the CDK breach report, was our first one to kind of launch this. But I'm so excited. There's going to be a lot of things coming, everything from a subscription model to where people can come on to have briefing calls with us, reports made for them. We'll continue doing these quarterly reports that are available to everyone. And we're looking at AI. One of the most popular right now that everyone seems to be really excited about is how to get into these OEM certification programs. How do you do it? What are the categories? What do you need to prepare yourself as you enter this program? And that's really exciting, because we're actually interviewing OEM representatives from every manufacturer who will tell us specifically the ins and outs of these programs. So that's one everyone's excited about. But we really felt like needed to be this deep dive trend reporting that is not happening in the market. And so it was a way we could fill a need.
So I've lost count the number of times I get the phone call or text saying, hey, Brooke, what pool do you have to getting OEM certified? That is so massive. So I just said, just this week alone, I had 3 different people. I was at a conference recently and I had multiple different companies going, hey, how do we get this program? You're asking the wrong person. I'm a smart person, but that is so above my pay grade. I'm going to now send that over to you. So
there you go. And that's true. It's been such a mystery. It's kind of this smoke and mirrors thing in our industry that people have asked me too. And I'm like, I got to be honest, I have no idea. So we'll actually be talking to the manufacturer themselves, representatives, and we're going to give a guidebook essentially of how to do it. What are the categories? What do you need to ensure you're ready for? And let's be honest, I talked to some people, and there's some pitfalls to being in those programs. And so also the pitfalls and things that you need to think about ahead of time before you determine if you actually want your product to be involved.
Yes, that's literally was talking to a friend last night, and he's like, well, there's this, but then because we're in program, there's this fee, they're going to take their cut. And I'm like, I get that. But it's we do have to think those things through and that's just one aspect of okay, is it really worth it or not to be with? And that's an only decision that you and your company can make.
Yeah, it's fast growth, but revenue certainly takes a hit. So there's some things to think about that I think a lot of companies, especially when they're new, they want to launch. That's who we work with. We're with those companies day in, day out. They like the idea of the fast growth, but there's certainly some things you need to think about before you go full bore into that program.
Amen to that.
I need to send your bees, Deborah. You just keep sending them our way and we'll give them the report.
Okay. So looking ahead, how do you see government regulations playing a role in ensuring data security within automotive sector, that their security is there?
I love these questions so much. And you sent me the prep questions before we had the election. And so I think what's interesting is here's the truth. I think we're going to see some change under Donald Trump with some of the regulations. I think he's going to become much more flexible. In some ways, he's going to pull back. I think we're going to see EV full support pull back. I think we're going to see a lot. It's obvious that a lot of the environmental kind of EV-based stuff is going to be pulled back. But one thing that is not going to change is safeguarding consumers' data. That continues to be a problem. It continues to be an issue. So I don't care who the administration is. I think we're going to continue. Now, the safeguards rule, maybe, this is just me talking, I have no idea, but the safeguards rule may be pushed out a bit more because, like I said, the incoming administration wants to be more flexible and help really revitalize business. And I think that may be one way they look to do it. But consumer data is going to continue to increase in importance. And I think we're going to see just more and more regulation around that, no matter who's in the White House.
Amen. It is. And it will be interesting. I mean, like you said, it's not a political show, whatever side, I don't care. It's just, I was talking to a good friend and he's like, hey, I don't really care at the end of the day. Like, I just know that this person wins. This is how I've got to curtail my business. This person wins. This is how I've got to do this. And so it's just knowing what dominoes are going to fall in order to succeed, regardless to who is running. Yes, agree.
Yeah, and I think the truth is, like, no matter who would have won, we have to protect consumer data. That's becoming a bigger and bigger deal. I mean, it's a trend. It's a huge trend across the board, not just in automotive, but it's not going away. We can't just bury our head in the sand and say, we're hoping this goes away. This is definitely not going away.
Well, I don't know if it was last year, I lose track of time at this point, but I was doing, like, it was more than once a month. It was multiple times a month that some OEM was being hacked. There were OEMs that were getting hacked like 3 times in a year. And it's like, so I just go back to, if the Pentagon can be hacked, why would auto not be hacked? Like, it's just a matter of time. You see the medical facility, medical industry gets hacked. Everybody does. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And do you have those safeguards in place so when it does happen, you can minimize the bleeding?
And we've talked to some great people. We're coming out with a version 2 of this report as well that will have like in-depth reports with data providers. We're going to have a cybersecurity like comparison chart. But one of the things we're finding through these interviews with dealers is they're like, okay, this will happen again. And to be honest, paper forms were like the number one thing they used to get around this. So it could be as easy as just paper forms to continue running your business effectively. So these don't, again, I've said this many times throughout this interview, but this doesn't have to be super difficult, complicated systems in place. We just all need a plan B for if this happens.
Amen. So the question is going to be asked, how do you foresee cyber attacks influencing collaboration and information sharing among competitors? And
okay, now that you said this, there's 2 different sides to this. So Chris, who was the lead researcher, was like, the dealerships who fared best collaborated. They collaborated among the groups. They all worked together. They had meetings. They had brainstorm sessions like, how are we going to handle this? How are we going to move forward? So collaboration within the dealership team was a really key indicator for success to keeping things going. But then also, let's take one step further and think about collaboration within the technology players, right? Like, there's things coming out with AI. Techion has a cloud-based system for the DMS that helps get things up and running faster. Anything kind of modern in that way of a platform is going to help mitigate this faster. So I think there's a huge opportunity out there for our tech vendors to work together to share information and processes that were put in place to come together and ensure they have like safeguards for this among the vendors. I think that's huge. And so, and again, just deregulating that data, the reason this happened is we had one silo of data owned by one individual company. That we need to figure out as an industry.
Yeah, and we love this industry. We love to put the walled gardens up, and it drives me bonkers. Like, oh, we're not going to talk to that. We're not going to talk to that. I'm like, but if we've learned anything, is that you actually do need to talk to one another, whether that's, hey, here's my technology. And I'm saying you're going to, I know people have thrown the word secret sauce, and it makes me vomit when I hear those words. That being said, is like, okay, so if this and this, do I really need to be a house under one thing? I mean, I know that for up until June 19th, it was, oh, if you keep everything in our ecosystem, ABAC ecosystem, oh, this can be so much better for you. Here's what all the benefits. Well, also when you do that though, all your eggs are in one basket. So is it
Correct.
really worth it? So it'll be interesting to also see, I feel, the ripple effect of saying, okay, for those software companies, for those whatever company it may be, do I really need to keep it all in there? And will there be some type of enforcement to say, hey, no, you can't keep people out of XYZ because they're not in your ecosystem? I'm really curious to see how that will unfold.
Me too. And I think that may be one of the biggest impacts of this, is just seeing where that goes and where that discussion goes. But again, remember, they're so ingrained at this point into it's really painful to change a DMS. It's really painful. So I think but in regard to data overall, we need to diversify. The answer is diversification. That's the key.
Oh yeah. I mean, there are a few dealerships out there that I know that actually have 2 DMSs, and it's because one, they're so comfortable with that one, but then the other one doesn't work because it's so archaic. I got to have another one. I'm like, so you're having 2?
Yeah.
For what reason? And that only opens up more things. But anyways, but that's a whole other conversation itself. But it is like people get so, I want my blue screen. I want my whatever it may be. Like, it's like, okay, I get that. There are better ways to do things though.
Yes. No, it's so interesting because even from a PR perspective, this is so funny. We've literally worked with a couple companies that are like, we, for the name value, need a national PR firm, but we're going to bring you in as our sniper firms because you do a better job. And it's just like, what? Why don't you just go with us? And so I think that's typical of what we're seeing here. You've got these legacy DMS systems, and then they're bringing in, perfectly to your point, other DMS systems because they know better job. The world's gone crazy.
Don't take a crazy pills right now. Seriously. Laurie, we are at the point of the show where we're going to jump in to a lightning round with you, and I just love talking with you as always. And you and I can, well, we probably do.
It's way over a half hour.
And it's like, when we first started doing this, it was like an hour shows. I was like, man, these are too long. So then we got the follow-up shows. Like, we got to cut these down a little bit. Right. But for those that are watching, they can see your QR code right below here. But those are listening in podcast land, how can they get in touch with you, and how can they find you?
Yeah. So if you want to look into our reporting and our new arm, off of charismacommunications.com, we have CC Insights. So just look for CC Insights. It's Charisma Communications Insights. And they can find everything. They can download the report there. We've also done like a main takeaway page that they can download for free. So that's the insights. But for me, the best is probably LinkedIn. Just look under Laurie Halter or Charisma Communications. I always love hearing from people. So I really encourage people to reach out. We'd love to hear from them.
Yeah, buddy. And she's usually everywhere. She's like hosting something. She's winning some type of, I don't know, World Peace Award sometime. Man, you'll find her somewhere.
Yeah, I just want to keep you with me. You just got to keep introducing me every. Yeah,
I can do that. All right. So the name of the show is Facts, Not Feelings. So how do you distinguish facts from feelings, whether it's in your personal life or in your professional life?
I love that. So I am learning. So I would say I have not been good at this in the past, but I'm learning. My gut is so important. And I journal every day. A lot of people who follow me know this. And it's so funny. In my journal, it'll be like, well, just don't worry about it and just go with the flow. Or like anytime I see like, don't worry about this, just see how it goes. No, I'll circle it and be like, remember to trust your gut. And so for me, fact versus feelings is I'm really starting to try to like centralize when I have questions, know what I know I'm feeling, and then follow that. And sometimes it's very difficult. Sometimes it's led to some really hard conversations, but it's always right in the end.
Yeah, and I get that answer a bit on the gut. And it's like, what's kind of a feeling? Like, well, it is, but it's not, because when you can't trust your gut and know that it is going to turn out to be factual, there are times that like, okay, maybe I was a little off. Hey, I misjudged someone. I prejudged someone, or the situation. But by and large, that gut is so important.
Yeah, well, it is. And I used to not listen to it. I tried to rationalize my way out of it. Like, oh, no. No. If I get that feeling in my stomach, and if I get that feeling, a lot of times it's in my chest and stomach, I'm like, okay, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing with this.
So what is something that most people wouldn't know about you?
I have so many. Like, there's so many. But probably the most fun, two of the most fun is I grew up in Alaska. So a lot of people are surprised to hear that. And then the one that I love talking about is I was a go-go dancer for a band in college. And like I got paid in beer. And I would go with this band. The band was called Nacho Mama. And I would go up on this little, they performed every week at a club in my hometown. And I had this little platform, and I'd have my white go-go boots, and I would do the dance.
I actually didn't know this about you. Well, if you told me I was probably intoxicated, like, let's be honest, but I did not, this about you.
No, I don't think it comes out that often. And the question I always get, again, sorry, TMI, but the question I always get is like, wait, what? Like, what kind of dancing? I'm like, not the kind of dancing you're thinking of, okay? Like, I'm like, keep that one. I had a cute outfit on. But yeah, no, I was the BAM's fellow dancer and got me the beer.
Man, that might go down as the best answer ever.
You probably never get that one again. I would not.
Probably, I know. I've definitely had some interesting ones on here, but that is definitely ranking up. Well, Laurie, as always, babe, I just thank you so much for everything you're doing. And for those that don't know her, please, you're watching now, so get to know her. She's an incredible human being. You've been dubbed the super connector like a million times. Like, she just knows people, and she's just amazing at what she does. Just thank you so much for being on the show. And this incredible like research arm, which is pretty freaking awesome. Like, it is really cool what you guys are doing over there. So thank you for that. Thank you for your awesomeness. And you all know the drill at this point. Find a way to serve today, whether that is opening a car door, whether that's a kind smile, just do something to better someone's life today and just being a little bit of more joy into their life. And with that, everyone, we will see everybody next week.